If this story made you think twice about what silence hides, stay close. The truth we tell next might be the one you needed to hear first. Not every ghost wears a sheet. Some sit quietly at the dinner table, smiling. And we're just getting started. The mornings used to be still here, blanketed in that rural hush that made every creaking floorboard or sigh of wind feel like a memory brushing past. But lately, even the silence had teeth. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea, the ceramic smooth from years of handling. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. I heard them before I saw them. The way Garrett's voice dropped when he didn't know I was near, the scrape of Delaney's heels across the hardwood floor, a whisper like a hiss riding her words. I didn't catch everything, but I didn't have to. Not competent anymore. We need to protect the estate. She wouldn't even know what she's signing. My name wasn't spoken. That would have required a kind of decency they'd long since abandoned. But I knew. WillI, that was me. Still is, though apparently no one was sure anymore. The estate hadn't changed much since Roger died. Dust had crept in like a second skin. The portraits on the wall were less grand than they used to feel. His stern father, my distant mother, generations frozen in varnished stares. Their legacy, I'd been told, was worth protecting. But lately I've begun to wonder, protecting it from who? Garrett moved back in last year. Said he wanted to help. That should have been my first warning. He never did anything without expecting something in return. I didn't protest. I didn't protest when Delaney followed, bringing with her the scent of cold perfume and sharper ambition. And I didn't protest when Cole, sweet, uncertain Cole, was pulled into their orbit. I suppose I thought I could outlast it, keep my head down, wait for the storm to pass like I always had. That was my mistake. That morning, I waited until their voices faded. Then I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I studied my reflection. Wrinkles had set in like cracks in old glass. My eyes, still blue, still steady. There was no fog in them, only fire, and yet the longer I stared, the more I heard her voice, my mother's, telling me to be quiet, to be small. That no one liked a woman who knew too much. They say emotional abuse is like erosion. You don't see it happening, but one day, you wake up and realize your edges are gone. When did I start doubting myself? Was it when Garrett stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Ma'am? Was it when Delaney labeled my confusion with dates as symptoms? Or was it when Cole stopped meeting my eyes? Cole, 19 and already learning that loyalty can be a currency. He visits me sometimes, under the guise of bringing tea or checking the thermostat. I watch him. He fidgets. He never says much, but I see the questions flickering behind his eyes. He's caught in something he doesn't understand yet, and I know that ache too well. They think I don't notice the locks on the liquor cabinet, the way the landline went down, the pills Delaney insists I take but never explains. She smiles too widely. Garrett watches too closely. I pretend not to mind, but I mind. This house is old. The kind of old that holds on to things, words spoken in anger, secrets slipped beneath floorboards. Every room has its echo, and lately they've all been getting louder. Yesterday, I found an old letter tucked between the pages of a cookbook in the pantry. Roger's handwriting, a note he never meant anyone to see. If something happens to me, don't trust them, especially her. I don't know if he meant Delaney or Garrett or both. I folded it up and hid it somewhere else, not because I didn't believe it, but because it confirmed what I'd feared. Today, I stood in the same kitchen, listening to the sound of my son undermining my sanity to the family lawyer, and realized something sharp and true. They want me gone, not dead, just quiet, gone enough to sign whatever paper they slide under my hand. That's when I decided to read the will. It's in Roger's study. The safe was meant for emergencies. I guess this counts. They told the lawyer I was senile, that I couldn't be trusted, but I remember the combination. The paper was brittle, his handwriting firm, not what I expected. It wasn't the version Delaney had waved at me last month like a trophy. This one was different, entirely different. And when I read it, I felt something stir in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Rage. And underneath it, resolve. They'll think I'm confused. That's the trick. I've been underestimated my entire life, and I've played along. Because sometimes being invisible is the only way to watch closely enough. But not this time. This time, I'm watching for blood. I wasn't supposed to hear them. That much was clear. The parlor door was cracked, just enough. They were standing close, angled away from me. I stayed at the top of the stairs, breath held, heart still. "He doesn't have to know this version was filed," Delaney said, her voice slick as oil. "She doesn't even recognize half the names in the newspaper anymore. You saw her last week. She thought her driver's license was a receipt." The man she was talking to, Mr. Farnsworth, the family lawyer, gave a tight, rehearsed laugh. He used to greet me with respect, even admiration. Now his tone had cooled, formal, and distant. "She does still own the land," he said. "If she challenges the distribution—" "She won't," Delaney cut in. "She thinks the updated will is the one Roger left. She's barely lucid. Garrett will handle it. Besides—" Her voice dropped too low for me to catch. My knuckles whitened on the railing. I forced my face into a placid expression and slowly, deliberately, walked down the stairs like I hadn't heard a word. "Oh, there she is," Delaney said brightly, flipping the switch on her voice like a polished sales pitch. "Lorelei, do you remember Mr. Farnsworth?" I blinked slowly. "Of course. You're the one who smells like menthol and peppermint schnapps." His face went pale. Delaney laughed a little too loud. "Well, someone's had their coffee this morning." They left soon after. I offered tea. Delaney declined, a little too quickly. Garrett wasn't there, but I could feel his fingerprints all over this. He had never been good at planning. He let others do the dirty work. Delaney was ruthless, and she loved him for it. I sat in the sunroom afterward, pretending to nap while I played the morning's conversation on a loop in my head. They were so confident, so sure I wouldn't remember, wouldn't care. I had let them think that. I'd built that illusion brick by brick over the past year, let them believe that my silence was confusion, that my wandering thoughts meant weakness. But I hadn't forgotten the will, or what it used to say. Roger and I had talked about it endlessly when he was still well enough to walk the orchard path with me. The estate was our legacy, not just the land or the money, but what we wanted it to stand for. He had insisted we protect the woodland, maintain the cottages, keep the orchard in the family. And he'd left generous stipends for the staff who had served us faithfully for decades. Frankie, of course, even old Judith, the gardener. Roger had included Cole, with strict guidelines for education and independence. Garrett was to receive enough, but not all. That was Roger. Fair, exacting, quietly moral. And now they were trying to rewrite it all. Later that evening, I waited until the house was still. I moved quietly, not that anyone noticed my absence anymore. I passed by the rooms that had grown dim with disuse. The study was locked, but I still had my set of keys. The smell hit me first. Cedar and dust, the ghost of Roger's cologne. The safe was behind the bookcase where we always kept it. He'd told me the combination once, years ago. I remembered. The door creaked open, and I pulled the folder out slowly, with the reverence of touching bones. The will was there, 2 versions, the older one and then the newer, thinner stack. I read them both under the dim desk lamp. Everything had changed. The orchard? Slated for sale. The cottages? To be demolished and redeveloped. The staff? Not even mentioned. Cole? A vague trust fund. Garrett? Everything else. It was like Roger's voice had been erased, but it wasn't just the will that caught my eye. Tucked into the bottom of the folder, barely peeking out, was an envelope with Roger's handwriting on it. I hadn't seen it before. The seal cracked as I opened it. The paper inside was brittle, the ink faded slightly, but his words were there. Clear. If this version is found, it means something went wrong. I don't trust Garrett's judgment. Delaney's influence concerns me. I've created a secondary version and left it with someone I trust. Lorelei, if you're reading this, don't let them take it. I know what they are, and I know you. You'll know what to do. My hands trembled as I held the letter, not from age, but from recognition. He had known, not everything, but enough. Enough to understand what I was now seeing in full. I folded the letter and placed it inside my robe pocket. I took both versions of the will and returned them to the safe, but in reverse order. Let Delaney believe her version was still on top. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, listened to the sound of the wind rustling through the cracked old windows, and thought of every moment I had chosen to stay quiet. Thought of every dinner where Delaney corrected my words, every look from Garrett that said, "Stop remembering," every awkward silence from Cole when he heard me speak too clearly. I had let them believe I was fading. I know I had made myself small to survive. But now I understood. They weren't trying to protect the estate. They were trying to erase everything that Roger and I had built, everything we had protected, and they thought I was too far gone to stop them. I rolled out of bed, walked down to the basement, and opened the old filing cabinet where Roger kept duplicates of everything. My fingers grazed the manila folders until I found it, an envelope labeled M. Whitmore, private copy. I opened it just enough to see the seal, untouched, Reverend Whitmore. He hadn't been welcome in this house after Roger's falling out with the church board, but he was still in town, still loyal. I replaced the folder and locked the drawer. Tomorrow I would call him, carefully, quietly, let them think I'm still asleep, but I'm wide awake now. Some memories arrive like ghosts, not with footsteps, but with air, suddenly colder, sharper, and thick with things unsaid. I stood in the parlor yesterday staring at my reflection in the glass of Roger's old cabinet, and I saw her, my mother, perched behind me like a shadow that never left. I could still hear the click of her knife against porcelain at dinner, the way she'd slice her meat with precision, her eyes never rising to meet mine unless there was correction to give. Sit up straight, Lorelei. A lady does not slouch. Don't speak unless asked. Men find chatter unseemly. Your smile is your best feature. Use it. They weren't instructions so much as mantras, and I swallowed them whole. My father was a presence, not a person. He worked late, drank later. My mother filled the air with silence, and I learned to shrink inside it. We weren't a family. We were a curated image, and I, the only daughter, was the centerpiece she polished until I glimmered just right. Quiet, agreeable, marriageable. By 17, I was engaged. Not to Roger, he came later, but to a boy named Thomas Whitaker, the son of a banker with wide shoulders and even narrower expectations. He never loved me. He loved the idea of me. My mother said that was enough. I broke the engagement after meeting Roger at a town fundraiser. He laughed at something I said. No man had ever really laughed at my words before. I mistook it for freedom. We married within the year. The house we bought was old even then, creaking at the joints just like me. I filled its rooms with quiet routines, polished silver, and Sunday roasts. I thought I had escaped the blueprint laid out for me, but all I had done was build my own prison with softer curtains. Roger didn't hit me. He didn't yell. He just expected. And I delivered. A son, an image, a life that made sense to the outside world. Inside, I don't know when I started measuring my worth by how still I could keep the waters, or how good I'd become at apologizing for things I hadn't done. The worst part? I believed in it. I upheld it. I taught it. When Garrett was little, I corrected him every time he cried. "Boys don't cry," I said. "Be strong." And when he turned cruel, I told myself it was strength misdirected, that he'd outgrow it. When Delaney entered our lives, I recognized that sharpness, that cold grace, and I welcomed her. Because that's what I was taught. To survive in this world, a woman needed to be more knife than hand. Now I see it. I helped build the very framework they are using to suffocate me. I sat with that truth for a long time yesterday, and it nearly undid me. But another memory crept in. One I hadn't let surface in years. Reverend Whitmore. He wasn't like the other men in town. He wore soft shoes that didn't echo when he walked, and his sermons were more about compassion than punishment. I first spoke to him during a fundraiser for the church roof. I'd been married only a year. He noticed my hands shaking as I poured lemonade. He asked me if I was happy. I told him I was grateful. He didn't press, but over the months that followed, he asked again. Quietly, gently, he told me once, "There's a difference between surviving and living, Lorelei. One keeps you breathing, the other gives you reason." He was the first person to ever suggest I could leave. He told me he'd help, that I had a right to a life that belonged to me. I never spoke to him again after that. Roger never knew. But now, as I stared at the copy of the will tucked safely in the filing cabinet, his name on the envelope, I wondered if Roger had once spoken to him too, if he had reached out in a moment of fear or doubt, if Whitmore had tried again, for me, through him. I had no way of knowing what Reverend Whitmore remembered, but I needed to find out. That evening I sat by the fire, the flickering shadows painting the walls like memories, and I wrote a letter. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of years I had spent avoiding the truth. Dear Reverend Whitmore, I don't know if you remember me. I think you do. You once told me there was a difference between surviving and living. I've spent most of my life pretending I didn't understand what you meant, but now I need to. I need help, not in the way you once offered, but in a way that might finally bring truth to the surface. I believe you were entrusted with something by my husband. If that's true, I'm ready to receive it. If I'm wrong, then forgive the intrusion. But if I'm right, then please, contact me. Quietly. I'm not senile. I'm just waking up. I sealed the envelope with wax, an old ritual I'd once thought romantic, and placed it near the front door for Frankie to drop off in the morning. I don't know if he'll respond. I don't know if he still lives in that same house by the river with the chipped paint and wild ivy, but I know one thing. The past is not gone. It's just buried under layers of obedience, and I am done digging my own grave. Dinner was served at precisely 7. Delaney insisted on it. She liked control dressed as etiquette. It's important for the family to have routines, she said that morning, adjusting the napkins into sharp, perfect fans. I watched her from the sitting room, silent, her voice slicing the air like fine china breaking. The table was set for 4, one too many for comfort, one too few for truth. I wore pale blue. They said it brought out the color in my eyes. I said nothing, just smiled, that faint, polite smile they'd come to associate with docility. Garrett poured the wine, his hands steady, movements practiced. Shiraz tonight, he said to no one in particular. Delaney's choice. How thoughtful, I said softly, accepting the glass, though I'd never taken to red wine. It made my teeth ache, but I held it anyway. Let them see what they wanted to see, a woman still playing by the rules of civility while slowly unspooling the thread beneath the table. Cole was already seated. He fiddled with his fork, his hair slightly overgrown, eyes darting from me to his phone. His discomfort hung over him like a second skin. There was something raw about him, still too young to mask guilt with charm, too old to escape complicity. Delaney sat last, placing herself across from me. Her dress was black, her lipstick red like punctuation. She smiled too brightly. So, Lorelei, she began, sipping her wine. How was your day? Did you manage to find your slippers this time? A slight chuckle from Garrett. Cole flinched. I blinked slowly, tilted my head. Oh, I did. Though I found them in the refrigerator, oddly enough. Must have mistaken it for the closet again. I let out a soft laugh, just enough to blur the edge. Delaney's grin faltered for a second. Just a second. The roast was dry. The conversation drier. I was telling Mother earlier, Garrett began, not looking at me, that we might want to look into simplifying things around the house. Downsizing. It's too much for you, Ma. Too much, I echoed. Yes, it is. He smiled in relief. I didn't. Delaney leaned in, elbows barely brushing the tablecloth. We've been thinking about assisted living options, somewhere safe, with people trained to handle, well, you know. Oh, I'm quite familiar with places like that, I said, tilting my head. Lots of people who've had their voices ignored for years. I imagine I'd fit right in. Silence, then a forced laugh from Delaney. You always had a dry wit. Must be the Shiraz, I replied, lifting my glass but not drinking. Cole tried then. Maybe, we could wait a bit. I mean, Grandma seems, Garrett cut in, sharper than necessary. Cole, this isn't up for debate. But she's not, I said, drop it. Cole looked down. I watched him. His thumb hovered over his phone screen. Notifications blinked, but he didn't move. I turned my attention back to the roast, took a bite, chewed slowly. You know, Delaney said, her voice turning syrupy. I found an old scrapbook of yours, Lorelei, from when Garrett was in Little League. Do you remember those days? Vaguely, I murmured, though I do recall someone suggesting I skip his games, said I was a distraction. Garrett stiffened. Delaney tilted her head. That doesn't sound like Garrett. Doesn't it? I said, setting down my fork. Memory's a funny thing, comes and goes. They moved on quickly, talked about the weather, the price of gas, the neighbor's loud dog, anything but the weight pressing on the table between us. I played along, laughed when prompted, nodded when necessary, and with each minute I watched their eyes. How Delaney flicked her gaze to Garrett before she spoke. How Garrett never quite looked at me. How Cole's foot tapped under the table, faster with each silence. They thought I was floating in and out of clarity, that I didn't notice how Delaney corrected every word I tried to finish, or how Garrett's stories conveniently rewrote history. They didn't know I was studying them. They didn't know I remembered everything. As dessert was served, store-bought pie, oversweet, I lifted my glass again, still full, still untouched. To family, I said softly, may we always know who we really are. They all raised their glasses, clinked, I sipped water, they drank wine. It was then, just after the glasses were lowered, that I saw it. The phones, buzzing, almost simultaneously. Garrett pulled his from his pocket. Delaney's lit up on the table beside her. Even Cole's buzzed in his lap. A pause, a collective glance. A smile tugged at Delaney's lips before she caught herself. I leaned back slightly. None of them spoke. But I knew. A group chat. Probably called Project L or something just as clever. I imagined the messages. She just quoted the refrigerator again. Thinks it's a closet. LOL. Should we bring up the will tonight or wait till she's calm? I'd let them think I was fading. They didn't realize they were the ones being watched. The pie crumbled on my plate. I didn't touch it. Cole looked at me then. Really looked. His mouth opened but nothing came out. I met his eyes and smiled, just a little. Enough to say, I know. He looked away. Delaney rose first, declaring she had emails to answer. Garrett followed with a yawn and an excuse about early meetings. Cole lingered, for a breath. Then he, too, disappeared down the hall. I stayed at the table long after the dishes had gone cold, the wine untouched, the toast echoing in the room like a warning. They had drawn their lines, so had I. The study had always been Roger's domain, the only place in the house I never tried to make my own. Even after he passed, I left it largely untouched. Books thick with dust, the leather chair indented with the ghost of his body. It smelled like old cedar and pipe tobacco, long since extinguished but never forgotten. A mausoleum disguised as a room. I waited until the house was asleep. Delaney retired early, citing a migraine. Garrett followed shortly after, muttering something about the markets opening early. Cole stayed up a bit longer, headphones on, eyes hollow. I waited an extra hour just to be sure. When I opened the study door, the hinges let out a long, weary sigh. I stepped in slowly, clicking the door shut behind me with a care honed over years of sneaking my emotions past judgmental eyes. The light flickered when I turned it on. A low hum buzzed from the ceiling fan, struggling against disuse. My fingers moved across the edges of the desk. Solid oak, carved corners, a drawer that stuck halfway through. Roger had hidden the vault behind the lower panel on the far bookcase. He didn't trust modern safes. Paper doesn't crash, he'd said. Steel still rusts. I remembered the way he crouched there once, late at night, slipping documents in with quiet deliberation. I hadn't understood the urgency then. Now I did. I pulled aside the collection of dusty law books and felt along the wooden backing until my knuckles hit the false panel. A firm push, and it released with a click. The vault was narrow but deep, concealed behind a decorative facade of meaningless encyclopedias. Roger had told me the combination once, years ago, when he'd been more open. 3 dates, our wedding, Cole's birth, the day his father died. My fingers didn't tremble as I turned the dial. The door gave with a low creak. Inside, a series of manila envelopes, a stack of ledgers, and an old digital voice recorder sat in neat rows, like soldiers waiting for orders. Everything was labeled in Roger's handwriting, tight, precise, no flourishes. I pulled the first envelope marked Financials GE Garrett Emerson. The contents hit like a punch to the chest: bank transfers, shell accounts, investments made in Lorelai's name without her knowledge, withdrawals from trust funds never approved. Roger's annotations were brutal. Told him to stop, lied again, suspect Delaney's involvement. The second folder read Medical-LS. Delaney had been forging documentation, mental evaluations, dementia screenings with doctored notes, emails between her and a physician in another state. All of it an elaborate scaffold to build the narrative of my decline. I closed the folder and held it tight against my chest. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. Then I saw the recorder. It was old, probably hadn't been touched in years. I pressed play, half expecting silence. But there he was, Roger. If you're hearing this, Lorelai, then I didn't manage to change things in time, and I'm sorry for that. I should have acted sooner, should have believed what I saw. Garrett. He's not the man we raised him to be. And Delaney, there's something dark there. She watches you when you don't see her, like she's studying you. They want the estate, but it's more than that. I think they want to erase you, to rewrite everything. If they've changed the will, check the copy I gave to Whitmore. And don't let them make you doubt your mind. You've always been the sharper one between us. The voice cracked, then cut off. I sat there on the floor of the study, the vault still open beside me, the documents spread out like wounds. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about legacy. It was about erasure. They wanted to bury me alive in this house, to let the image of senile old Lorelai replace the woman who once fought quietly to build something real. I was repacking the files when I heard it, the sharp pop of a floorboard just outside the door. I froze, heart thudding. I reached for the nearest object, a paperweight, clutching it in my hand as the knob twisted slowly. The door creaked open. "Ma'am," a voice whispered. "Frankie." He stepped into the doorway, holding a flashlight low. His eyes took a moment to adjust. "Jesus, Frankie," I breathed. "You scared the life out of me." "Shouldn't be in here alone," he said, gently closing the door behind him. "Not with the storm rolling in." I blinked. "What storm?" He pointed to the window. Outside, clouds had swallowed the moon. Lightning flashed at a distance. Thunder rumbled seconds later, low and steady. Frankie walked over to me. His eyes landed on the open vault, the folders in my lap. He said nothing for a long time. Then he crouched. "I figured you'd come in here eventually," he murmured. "You knew?" I asked. "I helped him build it." He gave a tired smile. "Roger didn't trust many people, but he trusted me with his hands. I kept the panel tight. Loose screws would have given it away." "Why didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to, but I couldn't risk tipping them off. Delaney's sharp, too sharp. And Garrett, he's got that look Roger used to get when he was about to fire someone. Cold and quick." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black flash drive. "He gave me this too. Said if anything happened to him and you looked like you were losing ground, I should hand it over." I took it carefully. It was light, innocent looking. "What's on it?" "Insurance. You'll know when you see it." I stared at him, the weight of years pressing between us. "Why, Frankie?" He looked down. "Because I remember you sitting with me on the back porch after my wife died. You brought soup. Stayed until the sun came up, didn't say a word, just stayed. That meant something." A beat passed, then another. "I'm not crazy," I said quietly. "No, ma'am," he replied. "You're just the only one left who remembers how to fight quietly." Thunder rolled again. I closed the vault and locked it, slipped the flash drive into my pocket, stood slowly. "I think it's time I stop fighting quietly," I said. Frankie nodded once. "I'll keep watch," he offered. And for the first time in a long while, I let someone help me. He was born on a rainy Thursday. Garrett, my first and only son. The nurses handed him to me, red-faced and wailing, and I remember thinking he will love me forever. As if love were something baked into blood, something guaranteed by the miracle of birth. I was wrong. Love isn't inherited, it's learned. And what I taught Garrett without meaning to was that love bends, that if he pushed hard enough, I would fold. He was a clever child, observant, too observant. He learned early how to weaponize silence, how to take and smile afterward like nothing happened. And I mistook his need for control as strength. I mistook his distance for independence. I mistook my fear of upsetting him for maternal devotion. There were warning signs, of course: missed birthdays, apologies that never came, cold silences that stretched for weeks. He'd punish me for things I couldn't understand: a poorly worded compliment, a forgotten detail, a dinner he didn't enjoy. I'd ask what was wrong, and he'd say nothing, like it was my job to figure it out. I used to wait by the phone on my birthday, not because I needed a gift or a card, just the call, just his voice. Some years it didn't come. Other years it did, brief, obligatory, like he was crossing off a task. Once, I asked him why he always seemed so distant. He was 32 then, visiting for Christmas with Delaney draped on his arm like a warning sign. He set his drink down hard. "You act like I owe you something for raising me." "I'm asking for a conversation," I said quietly. "Number, you're asking for a confession." He stood. "I did everything for you, Mom, and it's still never enough." I didn't reply. I just cleared the plates. Back then, I still hoped it was a phase, that maybe fatherhood, Cole, would soften him, that maybe the boy I remembered would return, but Delaney happened. Or maybe she was just the mirror that showed us who Garrett had always been. Cold, calculating, hungry for control. She didn't create the monster. She simply gave it direction. And I let her. I can't pretend I didn't see the way she corrected his sentences, the way she eyed my every move during visits, the way she subtly redirected conversations until my presence was erased. I thought, if I play nice, she'll stop sharpening the knives. She never did. My silence fed her. It gave her the room to grow, unchecked. And now they're here, in my home, rewriting my story. I wanted to believe in Garrett's goodness. I needed to, but belief is not proof, and motherhood is not immunity. Frankie came by today early before anyone else was awake. I was in the garden, the cold morning air sharp against my skin, clipping dead blooms with more force than necessary. He handed me something wrapped in oilcloth. "Found this in the attic," he said. "Thought you should see it." I unwrapped it on the porch, hand steady, heart not. Roger's handwriting, his journal. I hadn't known he kept one, at least not in his final years. I opened to the first marked page. Garrett came by again. He asked about the estate. Didn't ask how I was feeling, just about the money, the land. Lorelei says he's just stressed, but I'm beginning to think we failed him. Or maybe I did. Another entry. "Delaney is worse than I thought. She's feeding him poison, metaphorically for now. She talks about the house like it's already hers." Lorelei smiles through it. God, she's trying, but I see the cracks. And then the one that split me in half. "I've spoken to Farnsworth. If I die before I can rewrite the will officially, I've made arrangements with Whitmore. Garrett's name is to be removed. Entirely. He's not getting the orchard, not the cottages, not a cent more than necessary. He'll see it as betrayal. But it's justice. He's not the son we hoped for. I can't let him destroy what we built." The page blurred. Roger knew. He saw what I was too afraid to name, and he acted. And now it's mine to finish. I stared out across the garden, the frost turning the grass silver. I used to think a mother's love was unconditional, that it could redeem, protect, outlast anything. But love without truth is just fear dressed up as loyalty. Garrett betrayed me, and I enabled it, but no more. Later, I tucked the journal into my desk drawer beneath my old photographs, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew I'd need it soon. At lunch, Garrett commented on the mail. "Any response from the church?" he asked, pouring himself another glass of iced tea. I smiled. "Not yet." He nodded, unaware. Delaney didn't look up from her tablet. Cole glanced at me, then at the table, and I realized something else. This wasn't just about the will, it was about my voice. And I was done letting them rewrite it. I found Miriam's address tucked inside a cookery book I hadn't opened in a decade. Preserving Summer with dog-eared pages and pressed rosemary between chapter 2 and 3. Her name had been scribbled in the margin, along with a number that was likely long defunct, but something told me to try it anyway. She answered on the second ring. "Lorelei?" Her voice was smoke and gravel and disbelief all at once. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "I remember everything people tried to make me forget," she said. We met 2 days later at a little cafe off Mill Street, far from the gossip radius of my neighborhood. She wore a blue linen shirt with a yellow scarf knotted at her throat, bright, bold, unbothered. "You haven't changed," she said, looking at me like someone evaluating a hidden fracture. "But your eyes are louder." "I've stopped pretending I don't see the cracks," I replied. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. Miriam had always been a different kind of woman. When we were 17, she told our sewing circle that she didn't want to get married, said she'd rather travel, live alone, write novels. Our mothers whispered behind closed doors. Mine told me to keep my distance. "She's not safe company," my mother had warned. "She thinks too much of herself." So I stayed away, but I had never stopped watching her from across the street. From the edge of crowded rooms, from behind my own carefully constructed walls, she listened as I laid it all out now. The altered will, the recordings, the forged evaluations, the group chat I wasn't meant to notice. The things Roger had left behind, the things I was still piecing together. Miriam didn't gasp or wince. She nodded, eyes sharp with understanding. "You're not crazy," she said. "I never was," I replied. "Then let's make sure they regret thinking otherwise." We spent hours going over what I had: documents, voice recordings, the flash drive from Frankie. I showed her Roger's journal and the letter from Reverend Whitmore confirming he still had the original will, untainted and sealed. She had a mind for structure, for timelines. While I had spent years enduring, she had spent decades fighting. She'd sued her employer in the 80s for discrimination, lived in a van when they blacklisted her, wrote her own legal briefs. "You need a story," she said, "something they can't twist, your voice on paper before they try to drown it." So I started writing letters, not to them, to myself. Every morning before the sun rose, I'd sit by the window with my tea, pen in hand, paper smooth beneath my fingers. I wrote about the days I didn't speak up, the moments I let Delaney decide the conversation, the birthdays Garrett skipped, the hollow dinners, the quiet ache of becoming someone I didn't recognize just to keep the peace. Truths I had buried so deep, I had convinced myself they were just shadows. One letter at a time, I stitched myself back together. "Dear Lorelei, you are not a burden. You are not senile. You are not the version of yourself they tried to preserve like a photograph, blurry, smiling, voiceless. You are something sharp, something that remembers, and you are not done yet." It was Miriam who said the thing that struck deepest. "They were never family, Lorelei. They were blood. That's not the same." I thought of Cole then, how he lingered by the doorway after arguments, eyes wide with something like regret. How he'd bring me tea without speaking. How he'd fidget with the hem of his sleeve whenever Delaney mentioned next steps. There was a softness in him that hadn't been killed off yet. A questioning. I remembered him at 5 years old, hiding under the dining table, asking me if ghosts could be real. I told him back then, only the ones we let live in our heads. Maybe it was time to call that ghost by name. He found me in the garden last week, trimming the dead vines from the trellis. "Grandma," he said, voice low, "can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Did Mom change the will?" I paused, met his eyes. "What do you think?" He didn't look away. "I think she did." I said nothing, just pulled a dead bloom from the rosebush and handed it to him. "Truth isn't a weapon," I said, "but it can cut like one." He nodded slowly. We stood in silence, and in that stillness I realized I was no longer alone. Not entirely. "Miriam is coming over tomorrow. We're scanning documents, preparing a folder. I told her I'm tired of being silent." She said, "Good. Silence is what they count on." She's not blood, but she's family, and for the first time in years, I'm beginning to feel like someone worth fighting for again. It started with my pills. They'd always been kept in the right-hand drawer of the kitchen cabinet, organized by day, labeled in Delaney's sharp handwriting. I didn't need all of them. Some were more for optics than need, but I took the ones that mattered. And then one morning they weren't there. Delaney, I called. She appeared too quickly, dressed, composed, lips freshly painted for a grocery run she hadn't yet mentioned. Yes, Lorelei. My pills. I believe someone moved them. She tilted her head. I put them in the guest bathroom. Thought it might be easier for you, less walking. You mentioned your hips aching, remember? I don't recall saying that. Well, you've been a little forgetful lately. There it was, the knife sheathed in silk. I said nothing, just smiled, nodded, and thanked her. That afternoon, I checked the bottle. 2 doses missing, I hadn't taken them. Later that week, I noticed my letters, the ones I had written to myself, had been disturbed. The corners were out of alignment. One was folded oddly, creased where no hand but mine should have touched. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened. From the top of the stairs, I could hear her whispering into the phone. Garrett, most likely. She's faking it, I swear. The whole forgetting thing, it's not consistent. A pause. Then, no, I haven't said anything to Cole. He's already starting to look at me sideways. We'll lose him if we don't keep this tight. I crept back to bed, laid still for hours. The storm came 2 days later, a tempest that turned the air metallic and mean. Lightning split the sky. Thunder growled long and low. Power flickered. Shadows danced across the walls, like old memories clawing their way out of the plaster. I waited until the house groaned into uneasy sleep. Then I slipped out of bed in my robe, left the door ajar just enough for sound to slip through. The old cassette recorder I'd found in Roger's desk was tucked in my robe pocket. I hit record before I left my room. Down the hallway, I walked barefoot, letting the floor creak beneath me, letting them hear me if they were awake, letting them believe I was sleepwalking. I stopped near Garrett's door, voices inside, muffled. She found something. I think she's playing us. Delaney's voice, flat, cold. She's bluffing, Garrett muttered. She's not that good an actress. Maybe she got lucky, stumbled into something. We need to act. If she talks to Cole... The rest trailed off into murmurs. I slipped away, down the back stairs, into the kitchen. I sat at the table in the dark, the cassette recorder warm in my palm. It was all there, their whispers, their plotting, proof. The next day, I placed the recorder beneath a pile of folded linens in the laundry room, a decoy. I had duplicates now, one in the attic, one behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Miriam helped me copy the tapes. Frankie installed a deadbolt on my door, quietly, without fanfare. Delaney noticed the shift. She began to linger, watching me, setting down a cup of tea with just a little too much emphasis, closing doors that weren't hers to close. She cornered Cole one afternoon near the porch. I watched from the garden as she leaned in, whispering too fast, too close. He nodded stiffly, didn't look at her, didn't look at me either, until that night. The storm returned, heavier this time. The sky boiled. I sat in the sitting room, knitting a scarf I didn't intend to finish. Cole entered quietly. "Grandma?" he asked. "Yes." "Do you still use cassette tapes?" I paused. "I suppose I do. Why?" He held something out. One of the copies. "I found this in the linen closet." I looked at him. "I listened," he said, and then he sat down. No dramatics, no accusations, just tears, slow and stunned, as if the world he knew had cracked open at the seams and was leaking something he didn't know how to name. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You weren't meant to," I said. He shook his head. They lied about everything." "Yes. They said you were slipping, that you needed help." "I do," I said softly. "Just not the kind they're offering." He looked up then, eyes red-rimmed. "What do we do?" "We." The word echoed in my bones. "We take our time," I told him. "We build the truth, brick by brick, tape by tape, and when we're ready, they won't see it coming." "No," I said, "they won't." Thunder cracked again, and outside the wind howled like it knew something was changing. He came to me in the garden just before sunset. The sky behind him was painted in strokes of rust and gold, the kind of quiet fire that reminds you some endings are beautiful, even when they burn. Cole stood at the edge of the gravel path, holding the tape in both hands like something sacred and broken. His face was pale, eyes rimmed in a grief too old for his years. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "You recorded them," he said finally. "I did." He nodded slowly. "I heard it all. Every word the wind picked up, tossing his hair across his forehead, and for a moment, he looked younger again, like the boy who used to leave crayon drawings on my dresser. Before he learned that love could be conditional and that silence was the only thing that kept peace in our house. His hands trembled slightly. "Why didn't you fight back sooner?" he asked. It wasn't an accusation, it was a wound. I set down the pruning shears and stood straighter, brushing the dirt from my gloves. My voice came quiet, steady. Because sometimes, screaming just gets you locked in a quieter room. He blinked. When Garrett was 10, I continued, he threw a baseball through the kitchen window. Lied about it. I didn't punish him. I told him it was just an accident, because I thought loving him meant protecting him from consequences. I looked out at the roses. Most were overgrown, some dying. And when Delaney started silencing my words with sweetness, I let her, because she was easier to manage than my son's bitterness, because I thought if I made myself small enough, the storm would pass over me. I turned back to him. But storms don't pass when they know you won't scream. They settle, they build. Cole sat on the stone bench beneath the trellis, clutching the tape now like a confession. "They made me think you were losing it. Every time you forgot something, every time you asked a question they didn't like, they'd laugh behind your back or just give me that look." "What look?" "The one that says, 'Don't question this or you're next.'" I sat beside him, not too close, just enough. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, "but I heard the tape and God, Grandma, what they said about you." "I know." He looked at me, eyes wide and haunted. "They said you were in the way, that once the will was settled, they'd handle things." "What does that even mean?" "It means they weren't going to wait for me to lose my mind. They were going to help me get there." A long silence followed. He didn't look away. "I thought blood meant loyalty," he whispered. "So did I said. "But blood is just coincidence. Loyalty's earned." He wiped at his eyes, embarrassed by the tears. I pretended not to notice. "I want to help," he said. "You already have." "No." He shook his head, firm now. "I want to really help. I can keep playing along. Let them think I'm still on their side. I'll feed you what they say. I'll find out what their next move is." I studied him. "That's a dangerous game." "I'm already playing it," he said. "Might as well choose the right team." Something in his voice had hardened, no longer just pain, something sharper, a purpose. "Delaney watches everything," I warned. "She doesn't trust easily." "She trusts me more than she should," he replied, almost bitter. "She thinks I'm too soft to question her." "She's not entirely wrong," I said gently. "But softness isn't weakness. It just means you still feel things. That's rare in this house." He smiled then, small, sad, real. "Where do we start?" he asked. I took a breath, looked toward the house. "We start with shadows. We let them believe they're still in control. You nod when they lie, you laugh when they mock me, and when they turn away, you listen." He nodded. "And then, I said, we show them that silence was never surrender. It was strategy." He stood, steadier now. Before he turned to go, he paused. "Grandma?" "Yes." "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I reached out, touched his hand, just briefly. "You see it now. That's what matters." He disappeared back into the house. I sat there until the sun dipped beneath the trees, shadows stretching long across the earth. And for the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge of something. I felt like I had already stepped in. The house was too quiet for a Thursday. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed like a countdown in my chest. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing into my bones. Today, they thought they would win. The family lawyer, Mr. Farnsworth, arrived just past noon. Same brown suit, same limp briefcase. He smiled as if this was just another routine visit, another old woman needing legal closure. He barely met my eyes. Garrett greeted him like an old friend, handshake firm, voice smooth. "Glad you could make it." Delaney stood near the fireplace, arms folded, eyes alert. She had chosen her war paint well today. Black blouse, gold necklace, red lipstick. Her confidence was a mask with no cracks. Cole lingered near the hallway, his expression unreadable. To them, he was still playing the part. To me, he was a lighthouse in the fog. "Shall we begin?" Farnsworth asked. They all turned to me, waiting, expecting me to nod quietly, sign where instructed, hand them the keys to everything Roger and I built. But I smiled instead. A calm, measured thing. Then looked at Frankie, who stood silently in the corner. "Before we begin," I said, "I'd like to read the will myself." Farnsworth blinked. "Mrs. Emerson, this is the latest—" "I know what you believe," I interrupted. "But there's another version, one that Roger left with someone he trusted." I turned to Frankie. He stepped forward, pulling a sealed envelope from his coat. "Roger gave this to me years ago. Told me to deliver it only if something smelled off." Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Delaney narrowed her eyes. Farnsworth took the envelope with hesitant hands, broke the seal, and scanned the first page. His brow furrowed. This isn't the document you reviewed," he said slowly, looking at Delaney. "These provisions are entirely different." Garrett stepped forward. "What the hell is this?" Delaney's voice cut in, cold and sharp. "That's not legally binding. It wasn't filed." Farnsworth held up a hand. "It's notarized and dated. If this was suppressed or replaced without due process, that's serious." I reached out. "May I?" He handed it to me without a word. I unfolded the pages with care, smoothing them on my lap. My voice, when I began to read, was clear, firm, unapologetic. "To my wife, WillI, you have stood beside me through silence and storm. What is mine is yours. You are the steward of this home, its memory and its future. To my grandson, Cole, I leave the orchard, a trust to protect the land and funds for your education and independence. Do not let legacy become a leash. To my son, Garrett, I leave a minimal disbursement intended to acknowledge relation but not reward behavior. I regret the distance between us. It was not unearned. To Delaney, nothing. You are not of this family by blood or by bond. Your influence has been toxic. I refuse to reward manipulation." The room fell to pieces. "What is this?" Garrett exploded. "This is fake. He never said—" "He did," I said quietly. "You just didn't hear him or didn't care." Delaney stepped forward, voice tight. "This is a setup. She's manipulating you all. She's not well." Cole moved then, calmly, deliberately. "She's more sane than any of us," he said. Delaney whirled toward him. "Cole, I sent the will to the state attorney's office yesterday, and copies to the press, and to your medical board friend, the one who signed off on those fake evaluations. Turns out he's under review." Her face twisted, panic flickering beneath the rage. "You little—" She lunged, not at Cole, at me. I saw her eyes narrow, her hands reaching for the pages I still held, her body surging forward with the ferocity of someone losing control of the narrative. She never got close. Cole stepped between us, grabbing her arms and forcing her back. "Don't," he said, his voice low, final. "This is over." Delaney's breath came in shallow bursts. Her eyes darted from me to Garrett, who looked suddenly very small in the corner of the room. "You're not going to get away with this," she hissed. "No," I said, "you're not." Farnsworth was already on the phone, his voice tight. "Yes, I need to report a potential legal forgery and elder abuse incident. Multiple parties involved." Delaney turned to Garrett. "Say something." He didn't. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Frankie put a hand on my shoulder, solid, steady. I looked at Cole, who nodded once, not in triumph, in solidarity. Delaney stormed out, Garrett followed, silent, shoulders sagging like a man finally seeing the cost of everything he thought he was entitled to. I remained in my seat, breathing, present free. Garrett's departure is a silent storm. No one watches him go, no one stops him. He doesn't look back as he shoulders his bag, face hard with shame and a brittle resolve. Outside, the world is damp with mist and the quiet of early morning. The door closes behind him with a hollow finality. Inside, the air feels thinner, as though the house itself is holding its breath. Delaney stands in the kitchen, arms crossed, lips pressed into a bloodless line. The investigation has begun. She's been summoned to speak with the authorities about the extent of her involvement in the tangled family web. She doesn't know what to say. She doesn't know if the truth will save her or condemn her, or if she even cares anymore. Every word feels like a betrayal of the family, of herself. The weight of it presses into her chest, a phantom hand that refuses to let her breathe. Lorelei, meanwhile, moves through the house like a wraith. Each room she enters is a museum of half-felt memories. She pauses at the threshold of the study, fingers brushing over the doorframe worn smooth by years of quiet arguments and stolen glances. The walls are still lined with books, her father's favorites, most of them left to gather dust when the world outside became too loud. She pulls one down, flips through the yellowed pages, and sets it in the box marked Donate. She's done pretending these relics matter anymore. The living room is worse. There, the echoes of laughter and rage seem to live in the air itself, embedded in the old leather couches and cracked coffee table. Lorelei's feet feel heavy on the carpet, as though the ghosts of every gathering are trying to drag her down. She opens the liquor cabinet, staring at the half-empty bottles, symbols of celebrations that always ended in tears. She empties them one by one, the liquid glugging out into the sink, washing away years of drunken confessions and false promises. It's the tapes that hurt the most. She finds them in the attic, stacked in battered boxes, each one labeled in her father's cramped handwriting. Birthdays, weddings, Christmas mornings. The better days, or at least the ones they pretended were better. She carries them down to the kitchen, setting them on the table with the finality of an executioner's blade. Delaney watches her from the doorway, hollow-eyed and silent. She says nothing as Lorelei lines the tapes up like dominoes, each one a fragile piece of a past she's ready to let go. The lighter in Lorelei's hand feels heavy, but her resolve is clear. She strikes it once, twice, until the flame is steady and bright. The tapes catch quickly, plastic melting, film curling and blackening. The smell is acrid, bitter smoke filling the room. Lorelei doesn't flinch, doesn't turn away. She watches them burn until there's nothing left but a heap of ash and melted plastic, the last proof of who they were, gone. Delaney steps forward, tears she can't hide tracking down her cheeks. "Are you sure?" she whispers, voice barely there. Lorelei looks at her, eyes clear and unyielding. "Yes," she says simply. "It's done." She doesn't say it out loud, but they both know. The tapes weren't just memories. They were evidence of every fracture, every lie they told each other to keep the house from collapsing. Burning them isn't just closure, it's self-preservation. As the smoke clears, Lorelei moves back through the rooms, methodically dismantling the empire her family built. In the dining room, she packs away the china, each plate a relic of dinners, filled with tense silences and forced laughter. In the hall, she pulls old portraits from the walls, the frames clattering to the ground like brittle bones. She doesn't bother wrapping them carefully. The past has already broken them. Room by room, she empties the house. She fills box after box, her hands steady, her face unreadable. There's no ceremony, no sentiment, just the slow, deliberate work of erasing a history that no longer has any claim on her. She pauses in the master bedroom, standing at the foot of the bed where her parents used to sleep. The sheets are stripped, the mattress bare and cold. She remembers the nights she'd hear their voices rise and fall through the thin walls, love curdling into resentment, apologies drowned in whiskey. She takes one last look at the room and closes the door behind her. Outside, the day has brightened. The mist is gone, replaced by a thin, watery sunlight that seems to pierce the house's decaying grandeur. Lorelei opens the windows, letting the fresh air in, banishing the stale perfume of old memories and lingering smoke. When she finally steps back, the estate feels smaller somehow, quieter. The empty rooms echo with possibility instead of pain. She knows it's not freedom, not yet, but it's a start, and that's enough. She finds Delaney in the garden staring blankly at the tangle of overgrown roses. There's dirt on Delaney's hands, her eyes red-rimmed and raw. She looks up when Lorelei approaches, a question in her gaze. "Are you going to sell it?" Delaney asks, voice low and rough. Lorelei nods. "Yes, it's time." Delaney swallows, her throat working around words she doesn't say. She looks at the house, at the empty windows and the silent doorways, and something in her shoulders eases. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's defeat, maybe it's both. Garrett is gone. Delaney is under scrutiny, unsure if she'll walk away or be dragged down with the rest of them. But Lorelei feels no fear. The house was never her salvation, only her inheritance, a burden disguised as a legacy. By burning the tapes, by tearing down the rooms piece by piece, she's given herself permission to let go. The final image is one of quiet ruin. Boxes stacked high in the entryway, the walls stripped bare, the floors swept clean. Outside, the garden is wild and overgrown, a reminder that nature reclaims what we abandon. Lorelei stands in the doorway, the sun warm on her face, the ashes of the empire smoldering behind her. She doesn't know what comes next, but she knows what's done. And for now, that's enough. Would you like me to expand on any imagery or dialogue in this section, or move on to the next one? The cottage was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, creaky floors that sang at night, and a kitchen just big enough for 2 to sit with their knees almost touching. The porch sagged slightly, the roof needed patching, and the garden was more weeds than soil, but it was mine, entirely mine. Miriam lived just down the road. Close enough for tea, far enough for space. Some mornings I'd find a note on my doorstep. "Come by when the sky stops sulking." Or a loaf of bread wrapped in wax paper. She understood solitude wasn't loneliness. She understood silence without suspicion. After years of rooms filled with whispers and tension, the quiet here was healing. Cole visits every Saturday. He brings groceries I didn't ask for, updates me on school, and sometimes just sits. We've stopped pretending. There are no careful pauses, no second-guessing each sentence. We speak plainly now. "Do you miss it?" he asked once, looking around the simple space. "The house?" I shook my head. I missed the idea of it, what I thought it was, but not the bones. He nodded, understanding in his bones more than most boys his age ever would. Sometimes he helps me sort through the letters I continue to write. They pile up in a drawer by the window, addressed not to people, but to moments. Ghosts of who I'd been, fragments of who I'd forgiven, including myself. "Dear silence, you taught me to listen, but you never protected me. I'm keeping the lesson, not the leash. I've found a place at the women's shelter nearby. I don't do much, just make coffee, fold blankets, keep time. But they know who I am now. And sometimes when the timing is right, I sit in the circle and tell pieces of my story. Not the whole saga, not yet, but enough. Enough for someone to look at me and nod and say, 'Me too.' It's not revenge I wanted. It never was. It was voice. There's a girl at the shelter named Ava. She reminds me of myself, at 17, afraid of her own opinions, trained to nod when she should scream. We sit together most mornings before the counselors arrive. "I heard what happened to you," she said once cautiously. "Is it true? All of it?" "Most of it," I answered. "Did you hate them?" I thought a long time before answering. I hated what they made me forget about myself. But no, I don't waste space on hate anymore. It's too much like letting them live rent-free. She laughed, not loudly, just enough. I see her wear her shoulders a little higher now, like she's learning the weight of her own name. Back at the cottage, I've kept my rituals. Tea at dawn, a walk to the post box, journaling by the window in the golden hush of evening. Some habits are worth keeping when they belong to no one else. Today, Cole brought me a plant. "Ficus," he said, setting it on the table. "Symbol of resilience. Very poetic." I Googled it. We laughed. There are scars, of course. Invisible and real. I still flinch when someone speaks too sharply. I still wake some nights with Roger's voice in my head, not angry, just tired. I still wonder if I should have screamed sooner, but I'm not screaming now either. I'm simply writing. This evening, I made a pot of chamomile and sat with my journal. The last page, waiting. No rush, just readiness. I dipped the pen in ink because some endings deserve permanence and wrote the final entry in a hand steadier than I'd ever known. They tried to bury me, but I remembered I was the seed. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and fire. Inside, I closed the book. Not with finality, with freedom. If this story made you think twice about what silence hides, stay close. The truth we tell next might be the one you needed to hear first. Not every ghost wears a sheet. Some sit quietly at the dinner table, smiling, and we're just getting started. If this story made you think twice about what silence hides, stay close. The truth we tell next might be the one you needed to hear first. Not every ghost wears a sheet. Some sit quietly at the dinner table, smiling, and we're just getting started.